Religion is the opiate of the masses, as succinctly stated by Karl Marx. He believed that if people didn't have religion, they would rise up as workers and overthrow the bourgeois oppressors. Atheists love to repeat this phrase, even if they're anti-socialist. However, I've come to realize that atheism is also an opiate, just of the few. When you can blame everything on religion, you can often sit back and just focus on religion bashing. The level of political apathy among atheists is appalling. There are a few atheist organizations that work with charities, even more for secular organizations out there, as well as a few out there that work on advocating secular legislation, but we still have serious defects in our strategy for ensuring religion stops spreading worldwide. Many are all for charity, though the second someone steps up and tries to create a community which the church currently has a monopoly on, they are often insulted by their own. At the moment, religious organizations are also still the biggest givers of charity and soup kitchens for the homeless, though this year unbelieving women surpassed all religious people for charity giving. About 10 years ago, I seriously worried about our overuse and abuse of the planet. I still do, but I've resigned myself a bit more to the fact that the Earth is going to have to take a bit more of a beating until we as a global community grow up enough to invest in the science needed to stop the progression of planetary rape. However, the biggest problem I saw at the time was overpopulation. Everything centered around it. We were overusing the planet, and the planet was full and couldn't fit anymore. I grimly felt optimistic for the planet when a natural disaster or new war broke out, and the death toll was an incredibly high number. I believed war was a natural form of population control, and that at some point a genetically engineered bacteria would be needed to produce birth control when certain chemicals from pollution or toxins from risky behavior were sensed. However, I was going about the problem completely backwards. I didn't know the data on what caused high birth rates. If one's running on an old desperation mindset, where it's a high probability the majority of your children will die, you pop out as many kids as possible. It's tradition. When a military outpost in Iraq adopted a dog that all the locals came to like as well, the Iraqi people were shocked when the people on base were looking for a way to neuter the dog. The locals believed that happiness for the dog came from having many children, even though quality over quantity is actually so much better for everyone in the long run. Looking at the data of the declining population in Japan and Europe, and which areas of Africa show a decline in birth rate, began to change the way I thought about overpopulation, but the most striking and solid method of reducing birth control actually exists in Iran. Now, of course, a person's first reaction to Iran is, oh man, they must be even more brutal in their birth control policies than China if they had that much success. Completely the contrary. During the Iraq-Iran war, the Ayatollah encouraged mothers to birth as many babies as possible to fight against Saddam Hussein. They assumed the war would take decades. In the end, it only lasted for 8 years, and all of a sudden, Iran realized they were going to be dealing with a scary population problem. One-child policy? Hell no, it went against the Quran entirely. What they did instead is look at actual data and do a workaround. Luckily, there's nothing in the Quran that has a problem with child spacing, or birth control in general, so their first step was to ensure medical access and birth control to all women. Next, they realized that the more educated a woman was, the later in life she delayed having children, so they established easy access to higher education for women. Lastly, they created free parental counseling to Iranian families. This gave them the ability to analyze finances, information on family planning, and basic information on parenting. The birth rate dropped like a rock, faster than any other nation on the planet, including China. If you're worried about overpopulation, you have to be in favor of free or inexpensive healthcare and education. Wars and natural disasters just make the cycle worse, as people are impacted drastically by PTSD, making them more violent and potentially reducing IQ, increasing things like rape, domestic violence, and low education. And if you view education and healthcare as a privilege and not a right, the cycle will just continue, ensuring a high population of poor people that will just continue to reproduce more poor people. Going about the religion problem is exactly similar. The most atheist nations in the world have one thing in common: a strong social safety net, so one does not have to panic or worry about needs and turn to an invisible man for prayer out of desperation. They also have high access to the internet and incredibly well-funded education. If you want to eliminate religion using all the current data, you must support and implement policies shown to reduce religiosity in people. 1/3 of Americans still can't afford access to the internet in the US, and 1/3 of Americans are evangelicals. It would be interesting to see how much overlap there is between the two in that Venn diagram. Increasing spending on education, increasing social programs like those that exist in much of Europe, will have a much bigger impact on religion than sitting around on the internet calling people stupid for believing in God, when 1/3 of the population that needs to hear the message most can't afford to access it. America has one of the weakest social safety nets in the Western world, mediocre education, and the highest number of creationist believers next to Turkey. Coincidence? All of these factors make people less religious, and we have to be activists for those things. Changing little rules here or there in our laws directly focusing on just religion will only go so far. Religion is the symptom, just like how overpopulation is a symptom. Unless we fix the cause of the symptom, we will continue to have flare-ups and a struggle back and forth that will never go away. I know this goes completely against the libertarian mindset, which around 50% of atheists probably are, though I don't have the stats. However, the ideology of ensuring that government governs least has really never worked. The true middle class has only arisen twice in history. One when the Black Plague wiped out a large population of Britain, and labor became more scarce, causing laborers to have more leverage and demand better wages, or two, when FDR implemented government-funded programs such as Social Security that took the elderly population from 50% poverty to 10% poverty and provided steady spending, adding to stability during market dips. Every other Western nation has followed this model, though Europe has more of the population and half of the land resources we do, so there are some glitches in their area. The only time American libertarianism, not to be confused with European libertarianism, has come even close to working was back when there was a ton of free land to go conquer, and by free I mean stolen from native peoples. We have to fight for what works, or we will just be attacking the symptom and not the problem. We have to be ready to follow the models we know work, if worrying about religion is that important to us. Or we can sit on our asses, bitch on the internet, and wait for people to get smarter or grow up. Happy in our superiority of our atheism, the opiate of the few, ensuring the change needed will be even more uphill than it ever should be.